Hello, everyone. Welcome to our LGBTQIA2 plus charity stream. I am being joined by Beta, Laura, and Phil. You can see Laura and Phil's Twitch channels right under their faces. We figured that was the easiest way to know how to contact them. I don't know if you should contact them as much as just watch them. But today we are raising money for the Trevor Project, which works to prevent suicide for LGBTQIA2 plus youth. I have to get used to saying the long acronym, and then I'm also going to shorten it at times. If I say LGBT, I am referring to the entire alphabet of, I guess I almost said Alphabet Mafia, but we've had a whole discussion on that. But !Trevor will give you the link to our Tiltify, where we are raising money. We have a $200 goal right now. Any amount helps, so if you are able to, we appreciate that. In addition, we have a resource link that we're going to reference a bit throughout this podcast. !LGBT will give you the entire Google Doc of resources if you are someone who is kind of just figuring yourself out. If you maybe need more crisis level resources, if you're an LGBT plus youth, or even adult that is in need of speaking to a hotline, we have crisis center resources within that document as well. If you're an ally or someone newer to the community that is just looking for a place to start, then that is what you can do there. Yeah, we're just gonna talk about kind of our experiences within this community and go from there. If you want to start off talking a little bit about your journey thus far, anything that, relates to our LGBTQ community.
I've actually been surrounded by the community pretty much my entire life because my uncle, when he was a teenager, came out as gay. So when we were growing up, though, he was only open to friends, and he actually moved states when we were not even born yet, and I think he had left just to be openly gay, because I think there were parts of our family that he didn't think would react well, but I know that his siblings and stuff knew, and he had told my grandma and grandfather, and he had moved back when me and my sister were born, and then moved away when I was 7. But he actually moved away to move in with his boyfriend, who he had been with for I think 5 years at that point. They had moved to California, and he'd been there ever since. So I've been surrounded by the community a lot. And then when I was in middle school and high school, I did a lot of theater and drama, and there are a lot of people who are very much open about their pronouns and their identity and their sexual orientation and all of that stuff. So it was definitely an easy way to think about what I was, just sort of see and be able to ask questions and just have a caring environment where if you did have questions, you had someone that could answer them. And I would say probably my senior year in high school, I started to internally just identify as pansexual. And I didn't tell anyone, though, because even though I was in a supportive community, I did see a lot of gatekeeping, from friends, because I actually had a lot of friends who were openly gay, and I had a few friends that were openly bisexual and pansexual, and some of them were very gatekeepy about you saying something, and then you almost had to qualify it, you almost had to, they're okay, well, I'll prove it, it was very it just seemed very hostile. So up until up until this month, I haven't told my family or anyone like that. I just told the community and close friends. Yeah, it definitely was something that kept me there, because when you do your own research and stuff like that, and you don't have a ton of people to talk to you about it, you definitely don't want to feel like you're stepping on someone's toes, and you get imposter syndrome, and you feel like anything you say doesn't really have weight. And so I very much felt like I couldn't say that because I didn't have anything to back it up. But yeah, it is really nice to be able to say that to people, and have people that know that, and be comfortable being who I've known I was for 7 years. So
There's something to be said for finding the people that you actually can be open with about who you are. And I was definitely more of an ignorant child, one not knowing that I identified this way and went by these pronouns. But finding that community that really just accepts you for you, it's a level of just weight lifted that is unexpected. Moving on to you, Laura, whatever you're comfortable sharing with us.
Well, my story is actually very simple. I always knew I was different, but I did not know what was wrong per se. So basically, I made myself unhappy very much to a point of depression. Then, when let me see how this. I got my dad recorded a TV program actually for that was with some people that had something life changing happen to them, and they went on a vacation for a week with their family, and then in that week they would share their story. The one that my dad recorded by complete accident was one of a transgender woman, and when she told her story, it was very much relatable for me. Like like so many puzzle pieces started to fall in the right places. So I'm very lucky with my family because like my parents always told me, no matter who you are, no matter what you want to be, we love you. So felt very safe coming out to them. My grandparents as well, like my grandma has a far cousin that also is transgender. So I felt very safe coming out. And when I came out, my mom actually told me that when I was 5 and was taking swimming lessons, I already said I wanted to be a girl. So it's always been there within me. The thing is, 20 years ago, I live in the Netherlands for people that want to know, and the Netherlands are pretty progressive. However, 20 years ago, even that was still gay marriage was still a little bit weird. It was legalized, but it was still a bit weird. And that's why, and don't even talk about transgender. Like right now, there's a lot of transgenders in the media here, a lot of spokespersons for transgenders. So it's a little bit more talked about. So it's a little bit more easy for children even to come out and say what they want to be. And 20 years ago, that was just not there, and that's why it took me very long. I was 23 when I came out. I'm 26 now, so yeah, that's basically my story.
I
Phil?
think I think it always felt a little bit weird in my body. And when I was a teenager, I realized that I wasn't only attracted to men or to boys, I suppose, at the time. So when I was a teenager, I was fairly open about the fact that I was bisexual. And I did have people around me at that point who also did not identify as straight. But even then, I suppose there was a level of ignorance within myself and then also in people around me. But as I've grown up and I've made more friends of differing sexualities and backgrounds and such, I've still been exploring myself. I've had conversations with some friends about how I feel about my gender. And I'm still not really sure, to be honest. I'm still kind of figuring that out. And having watched Babbling Goat yesterday, I was just sort of pushed forward and inspired, and I'd actually had a conversation with Leah and said that I'd had these sort of thoughts for a while, and
like aim maps. I know there's a lot of warm-up maps, but I don't know what other.
Sorry, I was trying to link.
although I have been like very open about being from being a teenager to deciding that I identified more as pansexual, and being very open about that. It was very scary to sort of to continue to be exploring myself. It was, I don't know if that makes any sense to anybody, but it was almost like I was very comfortable with the identifiers that I had found before, but like it almost felt like it was too much. Like, oh, so you thought you were bisexual, and then you think you're pansexual, and now you think that maybe you're not a woman as well, and that maybe you're androgynous or something else, or still try. And it just, yeah. So basically, as of yesterday, I took the step to say, okay, I'm using the pronouns she, they. And in terms of sexuality, I've kind of come to the decision of it's just queer. And I think part of that was because of gatekeeping, but also part of it is that I personally don't necessarily put a huge amount of there isn't a huge amount of importance for me on labels, and I think they're something that can be very helpful for people, and they have been helpful for me through my life. But at this point, I'm just like, I'm not straight. I'm probably not just a woman. And that's kind of where I am. And I'm still it's still messy for me. It's still an exploration phase. But yeah, it was an emotional moment yesterday. But yeah, that's where I am. Still figuring it out.
I love that though. I think it's incredibly important in terms of representation to show people that this really is a journey. And that is something that was really nice that Babs hit on yesterday. If you have not followed Babbling Goat, please go do so. He's incredible. The panel yesterday was really great. I'm sure the VOD is still up. I just think it's important for everyone to remember that this is a journey. It's okay at any point to change what you go by. And someone in the podcast yesterday, or panel, sorry.
Was Paige who said
that doesn't mean any of them weren't true in the moment.
Right, it doesn't invalidate what you were before. Like, you might have been that thing. Like, if you were bisexual and then you realized that you were gay, that doesn't invalidate at that point that you were bisexual, because you might have just been bisexual. Like, it is all a journey as you go.
Yes.
You know, and you're not invalidating your old self or your new self by being something before or after that.
Exactly. I'm going to quickly share my experiences, and then I want us to dive deeper into the gatekeepiness, as that seemed to have been the overarching theme when we've talked about this podcast. So I thought I liked other genders in middle school and high school, but because stereotypically women hitting on women is so de-romanticized, I don't think I realized that I truly felt that way. I thought it was just, another straight girl that hits on other straight girls, until I super realized, oh, wait, I want to date them. That's weird. I don't just want to hit on you. I do think we'll get back into the gatekeepiness, so I won't jump too far into it. But I definitely agree with all of you saying that I think it's such a detriment to people coming out sooner and even feeling comfortable exploring themselves due to gatekeepiness. And I didn't come out until college to myself or anyone. I had friends tell me that I lied to my boyfriend that I've been with for now 8 or 9 years, and that not telling him immediately before we started dating that I am bi is a misrepresentation. And the thing is, I didn't know that I identified as bi when we started dating. So how was I to have informed him? Of course, I'm incredibly lucky. I have a partner that his only question when I told him was, do you still love me and want to be with me? And I said, yes. He goes, great. That was perfect. And so that made me feel very, accepted. And I know that that's not everyone's experience. So I understand where I am lucky in that sense. I definitely dealt with a lot of people hypersexualizing me from a young age, and that only got worse when I identified as bisexual. I had a lot of friends who would ask me to be a third in like sexual things with them and their partner. I never agreed to them because I don't like sharing. That's not me. And that's not against anyone who open relationships work for you or just hooking up works for you. It just never worked for me, and that wasn't something for me. But being hypersexualized by your friends because of your sexuality was incredibly difficult for me, as I already was experiencing a lot of hypersexualization as a young person growing up, because I developed a chest at a pretty early age and like got lots of attention I didn't want. And interestingly enough, I think that is maybe partially influenced why my pronouns have changed to she, they, and why I sometimes feel such a huge disconnect with being a female. Being a woman, I sometimes feel so horribly disconnected, and I'm still working through the process of, is that mostly due to trauma and people hypersexualizing me, or do I genuinely also just not identify with she, her as much anymore? I have a binder now that I wear sometimes that makes me just feel less disconnected from my body at points. I do very much feel how much of a journey this is, and how there are times where I'm like, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. I'm a little lost. Help me out here. It was a rough growing up, having all of those questions and not knowing what to do with that and not being taught about it. Like, that was not discussed in school. Identifying as anything other than cis, super not discussed in school. And I even remember in sex ed, I was not taught anything about types of sex that wasn't heteronormative. Like, I was taught shit. I just didn't know. And I think it's incredibly isolating when we're growing up as children dealing with hormones and life, trying to also figure yourself out without any guidance or resources. I've been thinking a lot about all the harm that was done to us probably growing up. So I wanted to ask each of you, and we can go around again in a circle. Of course, if someone has something in particular that they think fits right after someone's, feel free. But I want to talk about specifically, what do you think was the most difficult gatekeepy thing that probably stunted your growth within the community and discovering yourself sooner? What do you think that was?
Yeah, well, straight people. That's literally the only gatekeeping I've had so far, and hopefully the only gatekeeping I'm gonna get. It's straight cis people, because they are very quick, especially guys. They are very quick to say, "Oh, you want to be with guys then?" And I'm like, "No, sexuality doesn't work with that." So yeah, basically, it's the only, especially when I was younger, like you got very much bullied into the ground if you were anything other than straight, basically. So yeah, that's actually the only gatekeeping I've been subjected to so far.
I'm not going to say that's good, because that's still really rough and and also scary, because there's a lot of safety concerns with gatekeeping, especially when people use this odd idea that somehow fear is a good excuse, like an unknown about somebody else is a good excuse for not just gatekeeping, but straight up attacking, bullying, violence. Because we've seen it in the news. Even recently, someone is using the I think it was gay panic, but I think it was specifically for someone that was attacked or killed that was transgender. And so they're using the transgender panic defense, which is the most ignorant, ridiculous defense I've ever heard, that you don't understand something and that gives you the right to murder? That doesn't make sense. I don't understand how that's an okay for anything. Can I then argue that your ignorance causes me to panic and I murder you? No, that doesn't make sense.
It was what you said, like in especially in high school, like are already going through so many changes, and we don't get, at least I didn't get any info on anything else than heteronormative sex ed, basically.
Yeah.
Even freaking I'm not sure how you say it in English, but maatschappijleer. It's basically you learn about society. Nearly nothing about freaking transgender and whatever. Maybe a little bit about pride. I have to say that, but nothing else. And I think if I got that then, I would have been able to identify very soon, actually. So
That's a good
yeah,
point. It prevents you from even knowing yourself earlier. Like, hello, I could have figured this out a little earlier in life. Not that I'm not saying we should have regrets on that, but it is, I think, an important thing for us to mention so that people who maybe are allies or who are not quite as babby as we are in the LGBT plus community. We will say that a lot because we are not going to claim to be educators that we have been identifying within this community a long time. We will definitely point you to people who we think are better educators. We will constantly point to Babs on it, honestly. Babs may be young in years, but Babs is a lecturer and educator and just seems to be better at actually explaining how things should go versus us just kind of talking about our own experiences. Did you have something to add, Phil, in regards to the gatekeepiness?
Yeah, I think I've also been actually, on the whole, incredibly lucky. I can think of two standout moments in which I felt very very sort of persecuted and gatekept. In the sense that there was a moment when I was in school in which I had given some of my favorite teachers Christmas cards, and there was a younger teacher, a woman, who basically, I guess, complained about me. They basically told I think it was the vice headmaster. They told her that that I had made them uncomfortable. So I was pulled into a room, and I was told that basically, we know that you're very open about being bisexual. You've made this person very uncomfortable, this teacher very uncomfortable by giving them this Christmas card. I think it was particularly the fact that I put like with love or something like that, and I guess they objected to the word. And I just remember just breaking down and crying because I felt so embarrassed. And I thought, if I was straight, this wouldn't have happened. I've given cards to male teachers and I haven't been pulled in for that. And I'm not discounting the fact that, she felt uncomfortable, the teacher, and that maybe she felt that that was like a step over a teacher student line for her, but it just felt like it was very much centered on the fact that I was bisexual, that this had happened or that this had been brought up. And then later in life, when I had decided that I identified more as pansexual, I had a friend, a very close friend, who I think also would identify as part of the community, tell me that I was not pansexual because the way that I described the way I felt did not match with the definition of pansexuality, I guess, in her mind. And I guess she was probably thinking that she was protecting the community. But it was very, very difficult, especially considering I was going through a very, very bad mental health patch at that time. To have someone who obviously I had known for a long time, who I was close to, who I cared about, and I assume cares about me, say that to me, it was that was probably the worst thing that I've ever experienced. And that sounds like nothing in comparison to what some people go through, but it was like, this is someone who I'm close to, who I go to for love and support, and they are telling me that I am the bad guy, that I am invalidating like that part of the community or whatever. That was really difficult to
Mhm.
I
to be made the bad guy.
I just want to quickly say, you know how I feel about the fact saying what you went through isn't as bad as anyone else's, because at the end of the day, still not okay, still super
Right.
bad. And the fact that anybody made you feel invalidated is effed up. But I also want to point to the whole teacher thing, because the discussion was brought up that you identified as bi. So 1,000% it is biphobic that you were brought in to discuss the fact that you wrote "with love" on a letter to the teacher. You didn't write "I'm madly in love with you, please be with me." That would be a different
Right.
discussion. You didn't write that. I'm assuming. Sorry, I'm making an assumption. I am assuming, I think correctly, that you didn't write that. So
No, I didn't write that.
right. So that is both. Sorry, I didn't mean to call you bi. At the time, you identify as bi. Now you identify as pan. But I didn't
No,
mean
it's
to
fine.
erase that. But that is incredibly bi and panphobic to determine that there was an inappropriateness in that letter. So I want you to fully feel validated in the fact that your emotions were not incorrect. I think there's a thing that many of us, especially in the community, have this need to almost overcompensate, and we try to understand why someone feels the way they do. And I'm super in the wrong in times where I know I bring this up an incredible amount of time. And when someone came in here and wanted to have a discussion about people's existence and identities, and I allowed the discussion to happen because I try to come from a place of understanding that they don't understand. Maybe there's this reasoning they're saying these things. It's okay not to do that. It's okay to
Right.
not actually try to give a shit why that teacher may have felt uncomfortable to the term love, because I would give the teacher that benefit if you weren't specifically brought in and mentioned that you're bi at the time.
Right.
That's fucked up. We don't need to understand why a person is being ignorant. We do the best we can in terms of educating, providing resources. We don't come at a place of attacking people. But I think there's this problem we have. We're severely overcompensating for their mishaps. And
Right.
I just want
And
you
lack
to
of
know not
wanting
to.
to research too.
Yes, and I think we all need to know that we don't have to constantly do that. I'm even saying that for myself.
No.
I also just want to quickly point to the fact we're at $140.
I
So
saw.
Oh,
thank
shit.
you all
Thank you.
so much for donating. Our goal is 200 right now. It'd be incredible if we could hit that. I just want to say thank you so much. We're really excited that you're all here and listening to our experiences, and hopefully can share a little bit of yours in chat if you're comfortable. And as a reminder, guys, if today for some let me stop using guys. We've had a discussion on gendered terms. I'm trying to shift my vocabulary, so apologies. You are welcome to call me out on it. If you today identify as he, him, and tomorrow want to identify as he, they, power to you. Do whatever feels right for you. This is a journey, and that's okay. So gatekeeping moments. Wow, where to start? I think oddly enough, I've experienced more gatekeepiness within the community than like Laura experienced a lot more outside of the community. I experienced way more within the community, more paralleling what Phil mentioned. I've definitely been told that I can't be bi if I've not officially dated a woman, if I have not had sex with a woman. I've been pretty much asked to almost like relive my sexual history to prove to people that I am bi enough. Which, no, not your fucking business. Guess what? Unless I want to share it with you, not your business. I also want to point out the fact that we don't ask straight people to prove they're straight by telling us their sexual history. I don't ask you, how do you know that you like the opposite gender or a gender that's not your gender? Have you slept with them? No. Also, ace people exist. We are not going to diminish any part of our community. They all exist. You don't have to sleep with someone. You don't have to be physical with someone to have an attraction towards them, to have romantic affection towards them. I'm trying to think of like a specific moment that was bad. Oddly enough, I think it was just like a lot of little things where people were telling me to prove it. Being hypersexualized was gross and made me not want to identify anymore. I identified as pan initially. I got made fun of so much for identifying as pansexual that I have stopped using pansexual, and I just don't identify with the term anymore. I identify with bi, but I definitely identify with bi in the way that it's being sexually attracted to two or more genders. I definitely find myself attracted to a variety of gender identities, non-binary, trans. I don't seem to have an overarching preference. I don't necessarily identify as like demisexual. I definitely can have initial physical attraction. I don't need like the emotional connection to have that. But I don't seem to typically care. I don't mean don't care in terms of I'm going to ignore it, but I mean it doesn't change my mind about you in terms of attraction or liking you if you identify as a variety of genders.
Right.
I don't think I have a specific one though, so you are free to take over, Beta.
Well, I would say that I've seen gatekeeping throughout all of like middle school and high school, and the group of friends that I used to hang around with in middle school very much were like, some of them were homophobic, and some of them that weren't the people that were homophobic. When you actually got to talk about the LGBT community, they were very like you said, they were just very particular. Like, you had to prove it. Like, if someone was like, "Oh, did you hear that this person's gay?" And they're like, "Yeah, well, I bet they haven't like done anything with a guy. Like, I bet they've never had a boyfriend." Like, like very much middle school things, but like still gatekeeping. And then when I got to high school and people started to, actually really start identifying as like who they thought they were, I saw a lot of people who were gay say that bisexuals aren't part of the community and that they are just pretending because they want to act like they're part of it. Like, I was friends with a lot of people who went to pride parades and stuff like that, and they said bisexuals shouldn't be there because they're probably faking it just so they could be, part of the parade. And I had one friend who I was pretty close with come out as pansexual, and I just remember there were a lot of people who were saying that that wasn't a real thing. And I just remember like researching and thinking that that's exactly how I wanted to identify, like exactly what I felt like I was, and hearing people who were part of the community say that that's not a real thing, as well as people who aren't part of the community said that that's not a real thing, but people who were actually there said that that was just a thing that you put because you wanted to pretend, And I very much like remember having one person say that, and I remember them discussing whether Pam was a real thing, and this person was defending themselves and saying it was real, and I was saying that, it is a real thing, like they're valid. And like, I just remember going home and being like insanely depressed and like just re-questioning like whether what I felt like I was feeling was like real, like whether I really did identify as this thing. And I started to just question like, am I not part of the community if I identify this way? Like, is there even a point in coming out? Like, do I really feel this way, especially because at the time I had a girlfriend, so I was even more felt like, an imposter. And so I didn't feel like it was necessary to come out. And I think I questioned that for the next few years, whether like, because I obviously believe that when other people come out and say that they're pans or bi or gay or just queer, it's just like I know that that's all valid, but for some reason in my head, just because of all those conversations, like I felt like I couldn't do that, and I didn't want people to start to qualify, with me, because I've only ever had female partners that identified as female, and I had seen it so much that people question that. I even saw in just in like passing by, just even like small questions that when I was in college, like sitting at the lunchroom table, and someone said that they were like, I think I identify as bisexual. And then this person who identified as gay immediately was like, "Oh, well, tell me about all the girls you found attractive." And it was just like, that doesn't matter. They could literally have found not a single girl attractive yet, but they just feel like that is who they are, like they don't need to sit there and like list out this thing of people you find attractive. Like, it's just, I just didn't want that from just random people,
Completely fair. I want to move on to discussing labels if we can, and because I think it'll be interesting, as I know even some of us within this group have felt labels super help me. I don't have a need for labels. I know all time dependent in your life journey as all. But I do want to discuss that, and also discuss language a little bit. We spoke about this as a group already a bit in private. We do want to talk about language and how that's changed over the years and why certain words are no longer accepted, new words that were once not accepted are accepted, and giving grace to the fact that certain people identify with words that we may now find a little, that's not how I know that word to be used, or now it seems to be a little less PC of a word. But why we also need to respect the fact that while we have hardships and we are a different generation, we are lucky and grateful for the people that paved the way and need to give them the respect to identify as they feel fits them too. So I do want to touch on all of that. I know they're not exactly the same topic, but I think labels come into play there. So we can start off. I'll talk about labels quickly in terms of I super have found labels to be helpful for me. I think in a lot of aspects of my life, I find labels helpful, like my mental health, for instance. Being able to pinpoint that is helpful. I know that's a little different because it's actually something that I need to treat versus my sexuality and gender identification. I'm not treating that. But I think it just gives me a place to feel, I fit here. And it's not that I have to fit in a box, but I just feel like I don't feel like an other so much when there's this label that I can identify with. And I think that's incredibly important for youth especially that feel so out of sorts and feel as if they don't have a place that fits them and fits who they feel they are. So even if you don't feel like you completely fit the definition of an identifier or a label, Babs mentioned this yesterday. I know we're going to keep talking about Babs, but Babs mentioned that definitions are just guidelines. So do feel okay identifying with what feels
correctly.
like what is it with the accent? Is that what you're asking me to do?
He said it. He said it was, yeah.
His accent's fantastic. No, I'm not gonna butcher Babs's accent. If you want to hear Babs say it so much more fantastically than I did,
do it in Barbossa's accent.
It's Barbosa.
I can't do that either. Why do you think that I can do accents? Look at my D&D characters. The accents are like the equivalent of high-pitched and low-pitched voices.
You just gotta hold the D. You go guidelines. You know?
and that's actually really funny.
Guidelines than actual rules.
Oh, see, that's see, fantastic. Why did I need to do it? That was much better. Mine would have been like a weird amalgamation of horrible things.
People come to see.
I did want to point out, though, that Lee, when I said giving grace, you thought I meant like praying. That's really funny. No. Although, yes, you're all welcome if you're religious, do as you please. But I'm saying giving grace in terms of people will use labels that fit them. There are out-of-date terms that are no longer used. I'm trying to think of like something in particular that's not just a slur, so I don't want to say it. That's fair, yes. And there are some people who still identify with that, especially people who were in the community earlier on, not babies like us. And they may still identify with that term, and someone now would say, oh my goodness, we don't use that term. But don't tell someone how they should identify. If they're utilizing that term and they're not doing it to be derogatory towards anyone, is how they identify and what connects with them, it is important that we still respect that. Sorry, Beta, you can continue the discussion on labels.
No, I was just gonna piggyback off of what you said. I think labels are a great way for people to ground themselves. You know, I think that especially when you're just still figuring out who you are and trying to be your true self, that it was me full screen.
Yeah, it was. It went wonky for a second. I had to fix it.
I think that when you're just finding your true self and being your true self and you know, still on your journey, that there's a lot of people whose mental health can get in the way, and there's a lot of people who can feel really lost and can feel depressed or have anxiety over the fact that they don't know what they identify as or who they really are. And I think having a label a lot of times, like you said, helps people feel like they fit. You know, it doesn't feel like you're just like a blob that doesn't go anywhere. You actually feel like a little bit of structure, you know? And I think that can very much keep people grounded. Sorry, Leah's a blobfish, but for everybody else, I think feeling grounded and not like direction, but a something to describe themselves as, you know, because I know for me a lot of times in my head I'll always think about like who am I, you know? And I think if you don't know, like if like I know me personally, if I don't have a label, I very much feel like lost, and you just start going down this rabbit hole of you know, like existentialism and just kind of like letting your brain take over, and you start losing yourself.
For me, labels are like a double-edged sword. First of all, I'm gonna be a little bit controversial here. Sorry, but we live in a world that needs labels, which is kind of fucked up, actually, if you think about it. Because in the past, especially the last 200, 300 years, those labels have been used to hurt people. And I'm feeling like if we didn't need those labels, we could have been much further with freaking progression, humanity, whatever. That said, I do really, what Bida said, agree with the fact that labels do give you a place to belong. And let's be honest, we are human. We want to belong somewhere. So it's very much, it's like I said, it's a double-edged sword. For me personally, my label is transgender, and I literally said it like a little bit ago when Leo was talking. That's transsexual was like a term used previously for instead of transgender, and some people still convert to that term. But what people do have to understand a little bit is that when you're talking to someone that's transgender and you call them a transsexual, that is actually very, well, painful, because if someone goes with the term transgender, there's nothing sexual about it. It's the easiest way I can say it, basically. Because sexuality doesn't change. It's just you have sexuality and you have identity, and those are two separate things from each other. And that's what people need to understand that don't know much about being transgender or people that convert to the term transsexual.
Right, and making that line so that people understand that even if to some people watching, we are not their everyday life, they have not come across people like us, it is important to recognize that, one, our pronouns don't equal our gender, and our gender doesn't equal our sexuality. All of those are individualistic and separate, and that's okay, and that's completely valid. And just as we said, while you should respect how someone identifies and what terms they connect with, it is also, as Laura said, important to recognize that don't utilize a term that you don't know if that person is comfortable with, especially if it's one that's been considered outdated at this point. Unless they have explicitly said, I identify with this term that you might think is outdated, but I identify with that, then you respect that and you recognize that's how they identify. But if you use a term like transsexual, in a lot of our minds, you have conflated being trans with having changed your sexuality, and you are missing the key points of what being transgender is. So just keep that in mind if you are someone new to the community, if you are learning, if you are an ally, all of those things. Make sure you check out our resources. They're all there to help you.
And I think that even like the term transsexual, when it was used a long time ago, I think the outside world very much thought that LGBT, being part of the LGBTQ community, meant it had to be sexual, and we very much have like moved away from that like being part of this community, it's not about sex. There are things in there that might have to do with sex, but it is very much more about being yourself. It's very much more about you feeling like who you are, and for most people it is void of sex. I think people equating, like, if you're bi and they're like, that means you have sex with both genders, and it's like, that's not,
or that means you have sex with everyone.
It's just like,
that's more what I
like,
hear. You're sleeping with everybody. I'm like, I don't have time for that. What the hell?
Sounds exhausting, actually.
Right.
Who thought of that? Jesus.
I was just gonna make a joke. I was just gonna say that's obviously what I'm doing wrong. If I go back to identifying as bisexual, I'll get all the sex.
Everyone. I think it's important to, as Beta has said, that just because you identify within the LGBT LGBTQ plus community doesn't mean it's sexual. You can be bi, which typically is hypersexualized, and you can be ace or aromantic. You can also be ace and be okay with having sex. You can be ace and not be okay with having sex. All those things, all valid, all welcome in the community. I just want to let Phil continue the discussion though on labels.
What Beta said about labels can be very grounding. Definitely resonated with me when I was younger, when I was exploring myself. It was a relief. It was a big relief to say I am bisexual at that time, and to be able to call it something, and to identify with something, and to not just feel like there was just something weird or wrong or missing. Definitely, as I have gotten older and experienced more things, experienced myself more, I have gotten to the point where I'm just like, okay, labels are no longer helpful for me. At this point, the only thing I know is I'm not straight. So that is why, I identify just with the word queer. For me, that is just, just not straight, basically. But I think it would be harmful to be either way, to be like, labels are necessary or labels are unnecessary. I think they are a part of the journey. Certainly my experience, as much as anything else. If they're helpful for you, then absolutely. If they're not helpful for you, then that's fine too.
I also find it interesting that even just the word queer, I feel we use differently. You use it in terms of not being straight. I use queer more terms of like my gender identity and expression. Like I don't feel just like female, woman, whatever. I'm like, I'm queer. I don't know what the fuck that is, but that sounds more like me than just saying she, her, or whatever for my pronouns. It's interesting though that, see, even within the community, you can see that we can use words differently and still both are valid and correct. I hate using the word correct, but my brain's only functioning so much.
I think there are definitely people within the community that would object to it, that would say that queer just means gay, and that's that.
Yes.
And
and that would be the gatekeeping within the community. And I would like to point anyone to, if you are hearing people say you can't use that word like that, I would kindly request that you look for other resources and actual people that are educators and people who've been in the community maybe longer, or who help you understand that the whole point of LGBTQ plus, and as you can kind of see the flag we are specifically using the progress flag, and we're using that because it includes the intersectionality, but it also includes intersex people who a lot of the time have felt left out of the community. And I've heard a variety of comments in terms of it looks busy, it looks blah, blah, blah. To me, the whole point of the LGBTQ is acceptance. It's the fact that we want you to be the most you. That's the point. So I want everyone to feel represented, accepted. You are not an other. You are at home under this lovely giant umbrella that we're all under. That's what it is to me. And that's what I think is important for other people to recognize. That's what it should be for the community. We shouldn't be gatekeeping against ourselves. We deal with enough hate and criticism. If you were here before, we got called lovely snowflakes, which we love. We love the winter.
Don't be a snowflake, be an avalanche.
Yes, we make up an avalanche. Hell yeah. I'm a fan of that.
I think the LGBT flag, it's a rainbow. Like, it's already a busy thing. Like, I remember when I was doing the flyer, I did a like color overlays for all the letters, and you were like, that kind of looks like rainbow clip art, and I was like, that. I mean,
felt
like, that's cause...
so bad when I said it. I was like, that sounded really rude. Now that I say that back to myself.
I showed it to Jesse, and well, here's the thing: when you're making something, and it comes out like something that already exists, that was there, you feel differently about it because you like worked on it,
Yeah.
You did it, but then when you see it, you're like, Oh yeah, like that's what it is. So like I showed it to Jesse and I was like, I did this and I was like, Leah said it looks like clip art. And as soon as she said that, I go, yeah, it does look like clip art. And I showed him and he goes, yeah, that looks like clip art. It really did look like clip art. Like a rainbow is just a busy thing already, you know?
Yeah.
Like
Yes.
without
But,
the
like,
progress
that's
flag, like
okay.
the original flag, that's the whole thing. It's already busy. So adding more stuff to it is just like keep it coming. Like it like
I
we could have the
also-
Yeah,
busiest
but like
flag
we
in the
are a
world, you
busy
know?
community. We
Right.
Yes.
you know,
Right. It's so
that's
big.
fine.
Like
We're pretty
like,
busy,
positive.
you know?
right. Keep
Sorry.
adding to it, you know? Like
Yeah,
that
we've got
That-
to do, you know.
I like that you specifically said it was already a rainbow, but that means keep adding to it. I've heard a very frustrating counter argument. Everything's included in the rainbow, and it's like if people haven't
not true.
felt but also if people haven't felt included by that flag and by that rainbow,
Right.
and this extension makes them feel included, who the fuck cares? I want you to feel
Right.
included. I want to quickly get into chat because I know that I didn't mention it, so I'll try to mention it going forward, but we do have a 50-point redemption to answer questions. I'm okay with the fact that I can currently keep up with chat and answer questions this way, but also if anyone does have questions and it gets, you know, pulled better for me, you can use the point redemption. But this is a test, bananas. Yikes.
We'll see if I can see the redemption.
That clearly said bananas.
It does say
I
bananas.
misspelled. It's my bad.
Crooks said, I don't think about genders or sexuality or pronouns. It's all quite complicated. Does anyone get offended if someone uses the wrong term for them personally? I think Lee hits more of what I also feel is if it is not intentional and not repeated, I'm not typically offended. I'm offended if I can tell you are doing something in a derogatory sense. We typically can all pick up on what is someone's intentions with how they just said that. Were they coming from a place of being rude and offensive? If so, yes, I'm going to take it exactly as you wanted me to. I'm offended that you said something in a purposefully offensive manner. But if it is accidental and it's because you don't know, for instance, I did accidentally use they for someone who identifies as she, her, that is incorrect usage of pronouns. I think the way you're supposed to address things is the second you realize you did something wrong, go back, correct it, move forward. I think most of us don't want things to be a spectacle. I know typically I, in particular, already hate any time I feel I am the center of attention. It makes me want to throw up. It's a little different on stream. None of you are actually staring at me right now, so it's a little different. But don't look at me. Okay. But if you mess up, the biggest thing is if someone corrects you, and we do this a lot, even in private calls and stuff. If someone has changed how they identify, or someone misspoke, we will all correct the others. That is what you were supposed to do to also help everyone get accustomed to utilizing the appropriate bye Phil the appropriate terms that someone wants to be referred to as. So the biggest thing is to just do your best to adjust your language and do your best to correct yourself even in private, because if you're doing that in private, you'll be more likely to utilize the correct pronouns and terms in person when you're with them. Also, I'm glad, Emily, that you were liking this. Do not perceive me. I love that. That's one of my favorite. Do not perceive me.
when my uncle was here and we were talking about pronouns and gender identity and stuff like that, people in my family were they're just, it's also confusing. You know, there's so many things, like how am I supposed to know if someone does that? And it's like, well, the first time, if you don't know, like that's a thing that's happened forever. Even when people didn't identify as different things, there were people who identified as female who were mistaken for males. You know, that's gone back forever. And if someone just said, well, I'm a female, and then that was it, and then forever you knew that person was a female, you know. I think it's the same thing if you identify and they go, oh, well, actually I identify as this, or someone that you know and they've changed the way that they identify, that they'll correct you. And maybe for like the next time, if it's in an accident and they correct you again. But if it's repeated, then it's just like you don't care, you know.
That's
I think
the
people
biggest
very
thing.
much want to feel like you care, because it'd be the same thing as if you came in and I called you the wrong name and you were like, well, sorry, my name's actually Leah. And I was like, whatever, Phil, like that's fine, like, you know, like that's fine. And you're like, no,
We
Leah.
make
And I'm just
each
like,
other.
okay, whatever, like, you know. It's just like it'd very much be the same thing, you know. Like, and we've people just want to feel like they're heard and respected, you know. And that's the biggest thing. And I think being nervous to say something as someone who who doesn't know, you say, or you can ask, or you could just say, and if they correct you, they correct you. Like I've actually met a few people who have changed who they identify as they them, but when they're at family gatherings, they told their family once, but they don't correct. And if new family members haven't heard that, they just don't introduce it that way. They just feel more comfortable just like letting their family call them what they know. It's just easier for them. They actually don't want their family to even ask them, so they just go with it. But when it comes to friends and new people, they correct, and that's
That
what
brings up
they
an
like.
interesting topic that I kind of now want to dive into.
Mhm.
I have noticed, and you can all share then your experiences and if this is something you've encountered. I oddly enough sometimes feel a weird sense of still closeted in some parts of my life. I'm super
I still
not
am.
very fair. I'm super not going to come out to my family and extended family using they pronouns. It's not going to happen. I know I don't want to cross that bridge. I know I don't want to deal with it. And we talked about this briefly in a previous call, that I'm still struggling to remember that I'm a part of this community. And there are times where I'm like, oh, someone mentioned ally, that's me. And it's like, no, stop recloseting yourself, for the love of God. And I
Right.
just want to hear your takes on that. Beat and I have done a little bit of talking, so I want to try and pass it off to the other side. And then we'll get back to us. We just tend to not shut up sometimes. But if Laura or Phil, you want to discuss if you've had any experience with still feeling continued closetedness, purposefully or not purposefully.
Well, yeah, actually, it's like the pronouns for me are she, her, and definitely my parents have to get used to it, and my close friends have to get used to it. At that point, that they are 23 years, they've been used to call me he, him, and now it's changing. But that also it began at a point there where I had changed my name legally, and I like months before I already told them, okay, just start calling me that by now. So then when it changed legally, it's not a problem anymore. And some people, I'm not gonna name who, but they kept using my dead name, and that made me feel like having to come out of the closet like again and again and again and again.
That I can only
And
imagine how painful that is.
And I had to get angry at them for them to actually, I don't get angry very fast. I'm very patient, but if you keep continuing, then yeah.
I feel like that's something that even people who aren't transitioning should get, because even if I know if I changed my name because maybe something traumatic happened and I don't like my name, or maybe I just don't like my name and I just don't identify with this name and I changed it, I would be upset if I had to repeatedly correct people on that. And that's something I feel like anyone could identify with. Like my uncle is the same way. Like people used to call him, his name's Patrick, but people used to call him Pat, and he absolutely hates that. Like he does not identify that. So when he introduces new people, he calls them he introduces himself as Patrick. And when he's home, a lot of people call him Pat. Like he doesn't mind if his family calls him Pat, because I think he just grew up with that. But when friends and stuff like that, who he's told he doesn't like Patrick, like Pat, he gets upset. He's like, I told you that I like Patrick, that's what my name is. It's just like, yeah, like other people can identify with that, so I don't get why people don't follow that, especially when they know it's important. Like
It's
I
an
just feel
odd
like everyone deserves respect for that.
The biggest thing I have found is this odd thing of not respecting people who don't maybe understand what we're going through in our lives. Fine, but there's this weird thing where it's like the bare minimum is respect, right? Why be an asshole when you cannot? Phil, sorry, would you like to add into the discussion of if you have felt that? If you haven't, that's totally fine as well. Whatever you were comfortable sharing regarding being closeted, recloseted, any of that.
I think I get a little bit of what you have said about how sometimes I think of myself as an ally and almost forget that I'm not. Well, that I guess I am. I am to some parts of the community in some ways, but not to other parts that I actually identify with. And I think that is sometimes part of the effect of gatekeeping, is that you do sort of still look at yourself a certain way. I think because of the very privileged position that I am in, as a woman, as part of the LGBTQIA plus community, sometimes it feels like I'm getting away with it. Also, I think probably the part of my life that I'm the most closeted is with my family, particularly my parents. And it's not that they even have anything against it. Like they are accepting of it. It's just the relationship that I have with them overall, just in general, is not one of a great deal of openness and such. So it's not really something that I go into. Like, I probably won't bother telling them about like the fact that I've decided to change my pronouns. I just won't bother because there doesn't seem that much point to me. And I think it's interesting about, like you say about Peter, about like how anybody would be upset if you were speaking to them with the wrong name, and like about the nicknames and such, because I think for a long time I used to be referred to as Pip or Pippa, as short for Philippa. My family has always called me Phil. It's always been the nickname that I identified with the most. When I was younger, I wanted to be a boy. I wanted to be one of the boys, and I was very much a tomboy. And I made the decision when I was like coming out of a very bad mental health period that I was going to start referring to myself in like the workplace and stuff as Phil, rather than letting people call me Pip or Pippa, which was obviously something that was like, everybody else would look at me and be like, you know, that is a cute feminine name. That would be much more preferable to Phil. I did have one person say, when I said actually I prefer Phil, say, oh, okay, that sounds like a 40-year-old balding white man, like, and I was just
Someone
like,
said that?
so I was like, okay, I suppose I get that, but yeah,
Phil, that's when
they
you
were
say,
just,
that's what I'm going for, you know? I want to be a 40-year-old balding white guy.
I'm just sorry, continue first, Phil, before
I
I
think
yell.
they were just making a joke. I don't think they again, the intention, like they did not intend it in a bad way or something like that, but it was like, but it is sort of like, I guess it's something that I hadn't really thought about until recently, that it was a more masculine nickname, and I probably particularly derailed against derailed, that's because of you there, railed against
Derailevant, welcome to the podcast.
I probably particularly railed against Pip and Pippa because like they sounded girly, and I think, but same with imposter syndrome, like I felt like maybe that's just me being like, you know, it's like you say, like, am I railing against this because of dysphoria or because of misogyny and the patriarchy, or am I railing against it because actually this is the way I prefer to identify? Or is it because actually probably most people are a little bit more in between than they probably have thought about, and that gender's not like, you know, very one way or the other in general. So yeah, I think yeah, there are definitely still parts of my life where I have been, up until very recently, and even now, I'm like, you know, I'm still getting called Pip by some people, and
Makes me so mad.
but like, but I haven't necessarily corrected everybody.
No, I know, and
Like,
I completely understand that. I think I just get a level of anger because and it's an odd anger, since we've been talking about the fact that there are people we will maybe to an extent not come out to. And because what's odd is there are people in my life who I came out to as bi, and they are people who, we can kind of move into this next topic. They're people who claim to be allies and claim to be supporters of the community, or could be members of the community. They claim to be that way, but when you are specific members of that community, like me being bi, I am oddly enough not given the same amount of defense that I will watch these same people go to bat for my friends that are gay and and lesbian. And that's so odd to me. I will watch people go to bat and be defensive of other people in my life who identify within the community but don't identify the same way I do, and I don't get the same protections. I don't get the same people having my back, and I don't expect it from randos, but I'm expecting it from the same people who are doing it for our other people in our lives. And it's so incredibly weird to feel like it's not necessarily a fake wokeness, but it can feel that way. You can feel as if these people are almost probably unintentionally fake woke, but it's coming off that way.
Well, I think they're just trying to mesh with society, and I think we've talked about it before with other things as well. But I think it's very much like when it's closer to home, it's like, this isn't how I'm supposed to act in society because this is like different. This is my home, and now I can change this. And that goes with like friends too and stuff like that. It's like, if you see Caitlyn Jenner doing something great, and they go, oh my god, like, yes, like, I want her to succeed and I want her to do really great things. But then your friend comes out as transgender, and they're just trying to like struggle and live in their household, and you're just like, well, you shouldn't have done that, or like, you should have been more prepared or whatever. And it's like, you can't, it's like, why is this celebrity who's going through these struggles, why do they get your support but I don't?
It's when it's too close to home. Isn't that so odd? There's like this level of too close to home makes me almost blinded to the fact that you need my support versus this random celebrity that I will never meet.
Well, I wanted just to go back a tiny bit with just the family thing, because we were just talking about like people we might not come out to and things like that. I think there's a few different things. I think one, I know that for some people, their family using nicknames and their family not necessarily knowing their pronouns and stuff like that, family can sometimes feel like on a different level as far as like how they refer to you. So them calling you, she, her, if you identify as they, them, or she, they, or something like that, it doesn't necessarily like trigger the same response in your brain just because they're super familiar, So some people just go through that, and that's why they don't correct them, or that's why they don't want to come out and stuff like that. I know personally for me, when it comes to coming out as pansexual, I don't want to answer like questions, like and they're not going to be questioning in like in a we don't believe you way. They're just going to have a lot of questions, and it will forever become part of like who I am to them, and it's going to change the way that they think. And I think I'm not comfortable with that, because I know that they'll be supportive of it. I just don't think I want that shift for people that are that close to me, especially because like I know that they understand a lot of it and things like that, but I don't think I want to answer questions and like have that switch flipped.
I do also get what you mean about like a different level of comfort as well. Like, oddly enough, I have that level of comfort with Chelsea, who is my housemate. And she still calls me Pip, and I like the way that Pip sounds in her northern accent. Don't tell her that.
Sorry. I just loved your face on that.
But it doesn't trigger anything for me. It's like, yeah, there is a level of comfort that I have with Chelsea that is like, she could call me Dingbat, and I'd be like, yeah, that's my name. Cool.
I completely get that. Sorry. Yeah. Did you have something to add, Laura? I know.
I'm fine. I'm just listening. I'm just looking at
You're
the
vibing.
questions there.
Oh yes. No, I do actually want to address Crooks's question, so we can move on to that. So my only thing is, Crooks, there's a lot of debate on putting the LGBTQA tag in your stream if you are not actually a member of the community but an ally. I have overarchingly heard that it is asked to not do that because it is much harder for people within the community to find other people within the community because it gets flooded with allies. I also think there's now an ally tag. If I'm not mistaken, there's now an ally tag, and I think you are better off doing that. But sorry, go ahead, Laura. Yeah.
I'm gonna put a counterpoint at you, Leah.
That's okay.
Before the new tags came, the only tag we got was the LGBT tag.
Yes.
However, is that something we should be able to gatekeep for them as well then? Is that...
I want you to know
Because
that
that's-
personally, I was okay with them using the LGBTQA
Me
tag.
too, me
But
too.
since I am a
Yeah.
baby member of this community, I am definitely turning towards people who've been in the community longer, in terms of me being educated on that. And I have had way more people also come in my stream and say, I am having such a hard time finding people within the community because it is flooded with allies. So I will more lean to that and say that I think it is going to overall be more beneficial for people if the LGBTQA tag is for people identifying within the community so that we can find each other. I also think on the flip side, you put people in an odd position if they didn't use that tag and they don't use ally tag. Are they not an ally? Do they need to announce it to be known as an ally? In some senses, having the ally tag is nice because I do know streams that I would call not allies. I wouldn't go in those streams. So them not having the tag, easily gets them out of there. But I understand what you're saying. Before we had these subcategories, what was the option? I think some of the issue we also had is a lot of people thought stood for ally. It doesn't. We don't want to wash out any of the actual members of the community. So I think sometimes there was discrepancies and misunderstanding with that. And I even am someone who was ignorant on that until maybe this last year or so. Not in terms of the existence of asexual and aromantic, but more in terms of I didn't know that ally is not at all included in it. Not an asexual, sorry. In the acronym. Sorry, go ahead, Beta.
I just wanted to say that I think that they have an ally tag now, like that's also helpful. But before they have the ally tag, I think that you did have people come in and say that they had a hard time finding people that were part of the community, but you actually I don't know if you retweeted it or liked it, but you showed me a clip from Luxy Games where someone had come in because she was using the tag and they specifically asked like what she was and they wanted her to talk about it, and she said that
we're going to an interesting topic. Okay, yes.
That she was
saw
part
that
of the
too.
community, but she said that I don't owe that to you to tell you what I am and like what I identify as, and and there are some people who use the tag because they're part of the community that can't talk about it because they're closeted and they're at home, or they're just not comfortable with it, or there might be people who are there. So is that because they're that, in a sense, that person that's not going to talk about it, the person that came into the stream looking for that is also not going to find it in that person either.
Yes,
so
but I
it just be
think
better to know
I think the tag in particular, if someone is closeted, unable to talk about it, doesn't feel comfortable talking about it, you still know that stream is safe. So yes, I get why you would say, okay, but an ally stream is also safe. I think that it's okay to use those tags more for the community just because of all the... I've heard enough arguments back at what I was saying that I am okay deferring to people who have been in the community longer and saying, I plead ignorance here. If this makes more people comfortable, I'm comfortable with that. I did just want to quickly answer... Just before you continue, I just want to answer Crooks because Nikki asked what pansexual is. I don't know if I'm going to identify it right, so I'm actually going to let one of the people who identifies as pansexual define it in the way that they know, since I would probably accidentally say it's bisexual, but I identify as bisexual, being attracted to two or more genders, which can sometimes be compared to pan, but I don't know if it's viewed differently.
Well, so the way that I looked up and found the differences, and the reason I identify as pan is because bisexual was multiple genders, whereas pansexual was liking someone regardless of gender.
Got it.
And that is why I did that, because it's not necessarily multiple genders. It's that it doesn't matter what gender it is. Like, that is just who I like someone regardless of that.
I
You
think
get more attracted to personality.
I think that's more how... Oh, okay, more attractive personality, though. Isn't that demi? Or is that just emotional connection?
Well,
Yeah,
I
so
would
this is
say-
the thing.
right.
There's
But wait, let me also say let me not gatekeep as well. If that's not how you identify your terms,
but,
that's fine. I just wanted to say that because I said, is that demi?
That is kind of like been my experience, in that, like, if you say I'm pansexual, then you either get, oh, so it's basically bisexual, or isn't that demi?
Right.
It is. I think there is crossover.
Yes. In terms of blanket definition, we're talking, not in terms of how people may utilize that term. Like, I think I use bi more the way you described pan. I think maybe I was bullied a little bit out of using pan, which is, but I just don't identify it with as much anymore.
Right. Well, I think I will say if I came out when I thought of that I was pansexual, I probably would have just said that I was bisexual. That's probably what I would have said. But I think because I've waited so long and it's been so many years and there's just been a lot more information that I've been able to look at and read and things like that, that I felt more comfortable saying pansexual, you know, because I think that to me felt more true when I read that it was just regardless of gender.
I understand that, Crooks, and I respect the fact that, yes, you have a lot of LGBTQ plus people in your stream, and you want them to know it's a safe space for that, where they can chill. And Valiant even perfectly touched on it right there. The problem is it's so individualistic, right? So, like, just like Laura and I said, it didn't bother us. We also don't speak for the whole community, though. And as I will say that from my experience with the majority of the community that I've spoken with are not comfortable with it being used unless you are within that community. So I would suggest that you are better off using the ally tag now. Obviously, at the end of the day, I'm never going to tell someone what they have to do. I'm only going to provide suggestions based on what even me as a babby queer has learned. But yes, it will come down to individuals. There will be some people in your chat who are like, I love that you use that tag. That makes me feel welcome here. But also going back to what Beta was saying, to an extent, we don't have a right to know, right? We are not entitled to know how a streamer identifies, sexuality, gender. We don't have that right. We're not entitled. I very much loved Luxie's clip on that, where it's like, you don't get to fucking know that. I do think it's important to remember that none of us are entitled to know how someone identifies. So, and I'm not saying to be disingenuous, Crooks. I'm just saying that, like, for instance, I'm not going to ask you to prove that you're in the community. So if on your journey you identify within the community, that's your right. I'm not gonna be like, prove to me that you are a part of this. I'm not entitled to know that information. This brings us into our next topic, honestly. I have had a lot of frustrations and anger with people who I see say respect people's privacy, and then I see them go talking about celebrities. For instance, there's been a lot of speculation around Billie Eilish and queer baiting because of her newest music videos and how it seems like she was coming out because of when it was posted. And I can understand the concern and frustrations with potential queer baiting and people capitalizing on a culture of the LGBTQ plus community when there are hardships within that. And I understand the frustrations with that. But on the flip side, we don't know, right? Without someone straight up telling me, yes, I do or do not identify this way, we don't fucking know. So I do have aggravation when people immediately go to being mad at someone when we don't know. I don't know how you identify unless you straight up say, hey, Leah, this is how I identify. I don't know, and I'm not gonna speculate and guess because that's your fucking life. That's not my business unless you want to make it my business. And I'm happy to know. I'm not asking anyone to not share with us. I'm saying though, I can't just say you have to tell me that. That's gross. I'm not going to do that. And sorry, we can continue that discussion on how any of you feel on that.
No, I think that is that's just true. I mean, it's just a good point, you know? I think, like, people think that you owe them your life story, you know? And people think that you owe them to tell them, you know, if you identify a certain way and stuff like that. And I think that is where, Laura, your thing about, like, labels comes in, that I think, like, you should be able to have a conversation with someone and not have to know, like, if they, you know, what they identify as, or even, like, their pronouns, you know, until it actually gets into the point where you can, you know, correct them. But you could just talk as people, you know, because we're all people. Like, I can go into a room and I can talk to 100 people and I don't need to know, you know, what they identify as or anything like that.
To respect them, to have a discussion.
Right. And if I'm talking and I address a crowd and someone says, like, I'm actually this while I'm talking to them, then like I will respect that and I will then start doing that. But I don't need to go in there and as I'm going and talking to everyone saying like, oh hey, how you doing? What are your pronouns? Also, what do you identify as? Like what am I working with here? Like, because we're not things, we're just people. We're just gonna have a conversation and
Some people do that though.
and talk.
And
I think
there's
I think I
a
understand,
gray area there.
Right. I think I understand people asking for people's pronouns. I think they
I think Laura
want
had something to add.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, just go ahead. If you're finished, I'll add. Go,
I was just
I just know that we
I was
talk
just
a lot,
gonna
so I
say
sometimes
that.
have to stop both of us.
Yes. I think I was just gonna say that I think I get people asking for pronouns because they just want to make people feel included. I think it's the same thing like when you were in school and they said, do you go by a nickname? And I know a lot of people very much liked when teachers asked that because a lot of people didn't identify with their name. A lot of people didn't like their name, and a teacher asking what your nickname was so the whole class could hear it and that the way everyone could call you that. Like I think that was really good. So I think I get why people ask pronouns because I think they just want people to feel, included and like they matter. So I do get people asking that, when you're meeting someone.
Yeah, I mean, it's what you said. Like, we are all people. We can just have a conversation and just imagine. It all depends on the context. Like, if I go to a freaking festival, I'm not gonna go and ask everyone's pronouns for freaking 5,000 people.
Right.
What the fuck? Why not?
Shit, I'm part of the problem. No, but it all depends on the context. Like, if I'm gonna see someone like once, I'm not gonna go and ask their pronouns. If I know like I'm gonna see them again, like let's say my mom's boyfriend, I met him, and like, should he have other pronouns? I should probably know that because I'm gonna speak to him more and more, and So it all depends on like if it's gonna be a complete stranger or an acquaintance or relative.
I kind of liked what you said though, that it depends, because I was also thinking about the fact, just as we discuss people being closet, just as we discussed the fact that like when I'm home, when Phil's home, like I'm not going to use she they. It's not happening. I'm not going to deal with the fucking headache. So because of that, I also think, while I've heard a lot of people say you should be asking everybody you speak to their pronouns, that's what's appropriate, I think there's also a level of respect the fact that you don't know their situation. So everyone has an individual situation. If someone asked me in front of my family my pronouns, I think I'd be taken so aback and wouldn't know how to handle it, just because my knee-jerk reaction would be different than the one I've curated for the situation I'm in. And I think that's very important to just remember that everyone has an individual situation and to come from a place of caring, understanding, and empathy that you don't know. And their lack of giving you pronouns isn't always out of being an asshole and wanting to dismiss you. It also can be out of, hey, I have a situation that I can't really discuss openly right now. So like, I get you being respectful, asking pronouns. I know we can all try to circumvent that system, but we still have to do our best to know that we don't know.
I think I personally feel like I would much rather, and I go by he, him, but I personally just feel when it comes to any of that stuff, I would rather correct someone, like I would rather just be in a conversation with someone and someone, refer to you as she, and you can say, oh, well, if I'm comfortable enough, then, you could say, well, actually, I identify as she, they. And the same with like, if we were just in a conversation with a bunch of people and someone said like, oh yeah, well, like beat a string. And if I was comfortable with all those people, I could be like, well, actually I'm pansexual, or like whatever. I'd rather be able to correct, because I think, like personally, that's just easier than me, because then you feel like if you just go somewhere and you're just like, actually I'm this, it just feels like I don't need it to be about me. It's okay. Like like if it could be about other people. Like, and if I want to correct, I can correct, but that's just personally, I would rather just correct. But
and that's why it's so individualistic, because I actually don't know if I'd feel comfortable in a lot of situations correcting. I just wanted to point out before also looping Phil back in, because I want Phil to feel like, we don't filibuster. Phil, haha. Our donation goal is so close. We are $40 away from hitting our $200 donation goal for the Trevor Project. This is a whole charity stream. I want to do a quick reminder that if you don't know what the Trevor Project is, it is raising money to help prevent suicide for LGBTQ plus youth. They have a bunch of resources. If you do !LGBT as well in our chat, there is an entire Google Doc we have done of resources for all of you. That includes people within the community that maybe need some urgent resources if you're in a really tight position. It also includes just resources in terms of, hey, I'm trying to discover things about myself. What are some resources that can maybe help point me to a better path of discovery? And also allyship. There are tons of resources, places to start right there. So I recommend you click it. Hopefully that link is only viewable and you can't edit it. I'm hoping I did that right. If not, please correct me. But yeah, so we can continue on where we have a little bit of a not tech issue, just a cat issue. So we are doing that simultaneously. But I do want to say thank you to everyone that has donated so far. We can go back to what we were talking about, though, in terms of feeling entitled to knowing about people and things like that. That is all individualistic, what people want to share with you versus not share with you. I'm not sure if there's anything Laura or Phil wanted to add to that discussion.
I would just say, like, on the back of like the resources as well, that sort of extends to educating yourself. Like, there are tons of people out there who are part of the community who have accounts dedicated to talking about their experiences, who are authors and writers and stuff, and those are the ways that are appropriate to look for ways to educate yourself and look for people who have given consent to asking questions.
Like right now, we have consented to your questions.
Yeah.
Obviously, if you ask them in a rude way, we're maybe going to respond with a little extra sass. But that doesn't mean that at any other point, if you just see us streaming and hanging out, that doesn't mean you are just given the green light to ask questions. I think it's always appropriate to say, hey, do you mind if I ask a question regarding the community or regarding this before you go and pose your question? Because we might not be in the headspace for that. It's not a 24, like, just because we deal with this 24/7 doesn't mean every second of our lives we want to answer reasons for our existence and being.
It's like when I was in Pisco's stream yesterday and I was asking lots of noob questions about law and stuff, and I was like, I'm derailing this a little bit. I should probably not ask so many questions. Like,
it is also a little harder in a big stream. His stream is much bigger than this one, so I think at least with a smaller stream it's easier for us to sift through versus he gets a lot of questions on a lot of various topics and a lot of intensive discourse simultaneously. So his sifting looks a little different. A lot of the time it looks more like complete shutout. It's just like, all right, I don't have time to even address that. Moving right along. Did you have something to add? Sorry, Laura.
I mean, like, for questions wise, I'm very open about it personally, because like even at work, like people have questions, and honestly, that's where I personally think it's good to ask questions if they are actually interested. Like I also mentioned this in the Discord group, where is it actual interest, or is it going to be a setup for a bigotry joke or something? So, but yeah, that's what I prefer to do is like explain stuff. If they have questions, I'll answer any question. I'm an open book about that. However, you do need to know when you can ask certain questions. I think the timing for questions is very important. Like if I'm talking about freaking, I don't know, Pokemon Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl, and you're gonna go...
You never talk about Pokemon live.
Never. Never talk about Pokemon.
I knew you were gonna grab. I knew.
But like, if I'm talking about Pokemon and you're gonna go and ask like, what is your freaking life story? Like, that's not a good time to ask such a question. Like, you can DM me if you want to know, but
right.
not
giving the topic the respect it deserves. You know, it's a weighty topic. It's not something that you bring up casually. You know, you're not a curiosity.
Exactly.
Oh my god, I think that word in particular, right? I feel like
Mhm.
you so feel when people are treating you like a curiosity. You're like, am I in a museum? Like, I feel
Right.
incredibly oddly vulnerable and picked apart.
And I think that goes with the way people ask questions too, you know? Because I think, in a sense, if you are something that people don't know about and they are curious about, like, in a sense, you are a curiosity, but there's a difference between being curious and respectfully asking people things because you want to know and treating someone like a curiosity, you know, and you know, being like, this is an alien, like, oh my
Right.
god, like, I can't wait to find out all this information about them.
I
Or
can't
just
wait.
like, oh, this person identifies as like she they, like, I wonder, you know, if like, you know, if I can just ask questions, you know. I'm like, oh hey, like, what does this mean? It's like, oh, also you identify as bisexual, like, you know, what is that like? You know, it's different than just like bisexual. This will go great in my collection. You know, like, you know, I think it's different. Just
What
like,
I want a
there's
clip of that.
respectful way.
Oh my god, I'm going to clip you saying that. That's going to be a new sound command. Oh my god, this will go great in my collection.
I love the way you say, like, oh, bisexual, how does that work? Well, first of all, I suffocate you and then I plant an egg inside of your chest.
Bisexual, how does that work?
Alien
I
versus
just fuck
Predator.
everything. I just, like, we bisexuals, we just have sex with everything, you know? That's just that's how
Please
it
don't
works.
clip that out of context. That is sarcasm.
Yeah, sorry.
Sarcasm. I do want to open the floor up to, if there are any people in chat who do have some questions they would like us to address, feel free to ask.
Or stories.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if you have anything to ask, that's fine. Also, of course, if anyone in the group has anything they want to specifically add.
Actually, I have a nice tie-in for Bida's collection. Comment. I mean, we talked about this, like the fetishizing of different groups.
Yeah.
That's
It's a
I'll start
huge
if you
thing.
want to.
Go
It's a
ahead,
huge
yeah.
thing, definitely.
Go ahead,
Go
Laura.
ahead.
Start that. Start
The
this
amount
fun
of times,
topic.
literally. Okay, so I'm on my mobile phone. I have a app called Animo, and this is basically it's an app that has a lot of different sub apps for different categories. This one is for LGBT purposes. The amount of times I've had someone ask, quite literally, "Do you want to have sex with me just because I want to be with a transgender person?" is astounding.
Sorry, like my knee jerk is to vomit because it's so.
Yeah,
and sorry, the vomit. I
we
want
are
to
not-
clarify the specific vomiting is towards anyone thinking that you are something to be fetishized.
Exactly, and I have a freaking whisper history with someone that was also like. At first, it looked like he was very interested in like how the transgender process worked, but then he started about talking about how he can't wait to have his first experience. I'm like, dude, it's like just with a normal person, cisgender persons, I should say. Sorry, but yeah, experience. Like we are some sort of freaking knot on your bedpost or something.
Right, like they ticked that box off.
Mm-hmm.
And I even have had friends. I'm not friends with them anymore, but they would seriously think that their dick was such a gift they could turn a lesbian woman into a straight woman.
Oh my god. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like
it's
there
a
are a lot of-
challenge.
there is a
That
there is
belongs
a
in a museum.
freaking that freaking SGL. But yeah, that's like so. I don't know where people get this, but if you're with a trans woman, it's not gonna be much different than being with a cis woman. If you're gonna be with a freaking trans man, it's not gonna be much different than being with a cis man. Like, what is? We are like it's the same with curiosity, but it's more like that. We are like a prize to them, basically.
Yeah, like a really uncomfortable trophy, and you're just
Yeah.
like, I don't remember
Yeah.
signing up for that. So weird.
Like, yeah, and it's mostly men. I don't think I have had a woman that
Wow.
was like that. But it's mostly men, sorry, Bida.
Sorry, Vita.
But, yeah.
I oddly have the opposite experience being bi. I feel incredibly fetishized more by straight identifying women. That they identify straight or they identify as being bi-curious. I am never looking to change someone's sexuality. It's one thing if you say, hey, I don't know how I identify yet, but I know that I'm like interested in you. That's different. I'm okay with you not having a label for it. But if you say you're straight, that I'm not interested in pursuing you. But I do definitely think there is this very odd thing where I've had a lot of straight identifying friends that are women hit on me, and they think it's kind of a game. And it's not a game. Like, I know that a lot of us can jokingly flirt, but there is a huge difference between when you feel your friends just joking with you versus you feel someone very much hitting on you, making like advances. And you're like, I know you don't identify this way, so like, why are you treating me just like this weird thing, almost like for them to have a pick-me-up, right? They're hoping I'll hit on them, and that'll give them like a little ego boost, and they'll feel good about themselves. I even had an instance where I had a crush on a friend who I don't know how they identified necessarily, but I know that I don't think they were interested in me. Fine. And we were at a bar, and a girl, it was when I was single. I want to make it clear I was not cheating on Rico. And this girl came up to me and was hitting on me, exchanged numbers, and then my friend got jealous and like protective and then started dancing all over me to the point that this girl was like, do you have a thing with this person? Like, I don't want to intervene with that and like get in a messy situation. And you put your friends that are bi in such an uncomfortable position when you use us as just kind of this tool to fetishize. And I was actively looking to meet people and to maybe go on dates and stuff, and to just have them kind of push me aside when they, making it clear they weren't interested in me, but then pulling me back in when they thought that someone else was interested in me. That's so fucked. That's fucked in any sense, but I'm speaking specifically in terms of the fetishization of my sexuality.
I don't know that I've ever identified ever being fetishized for my sexuality. Definitely been mistreated because of my perceived gender, but yeah, not so much for that. I think I've been very lucky in that sense. Either that or I just haven't noticed it. Either that or I'm just really like dense.
Don't get me wrong, I super have had moments where I'm like, I'm a fucking idiot. Like, someone will point out, like, Leah, that person in chat was like baiting you. That person was like clearly making gross comments about you being in an LGBTQ community. And I fucking don't notice. I think I sometimes come from a place of too much ignorance where I hope and look for the good in people, but sometimes to a fault, where I'm looking at chat and I'm like, you're asking that in such a bad way, but you don't mean it that way. Like, I will always initially come at it from that sense of, you've just worded that poorly, but I will too many times do that.
I think you've definitely had someone come in here who asked a question in a very odd way, and it very much seemed like a not an insult, but just like a calling you out almost. And then you just asked them to clarify, and they did a little bit, and then you started having the discussion, and then they just started having the discussion back, and it turned out that they had just like asked that in a odd way. But they very much enjoyed you just having the conversation with them. And I think that's an instance where like that's okay, you know, I think it very much just depends on the way something's written, because it was the way they wrote something was like on the edge, you know? Like, even I was just like, I don't know if I would like time that out or like something like that. So, you know, I think it depends, like, because I think it's easy to tell.
They were frustrated because they were looking for LGBT streamers, and so I think they were trying to qualify if you were one or not.
Yes, they kept finding allies in the tag. Yes. And that's part of what I was thinking about when I was answering Crooks's question earlier.
I assume so.
Yes, it's just since I have heard directly people's frustrations, I'm gonna be honest, I don't search the tag that much because a lot of my
I
recommended
don't.
is that tag. So
Right.
I am lucky in the sense that my recommended has been curated enough at this point that I am getting a lot more of the content readily shown to me versus having to look it out to a crazy extent. That doesn't mean I don't need to be doing that. I'm not claiming that I don't need to put in more work. I definitely do. It's important to be exposed to a variety of human beings. But I haven't had that struggle because I haven't really searched the tag to a crazy extent. So I haven't run into a lot of allies using the tag. I mostly am surrounded by other people within the community. But I just think that while it is important to give people courtesy and to try to see the best in them, I am learning the flip side where I need to not always do that because it sometimes is harmful to those in the stream and in the community already that feel like I'm letting someone question them. And that is never my intent. No one is allowed to question your right to exist and who you are. That is fucking you. And I will not stand by people questioning that. I think I sometimes lost the line between it's important to educate people so they stop being ignorant towards us as a community versus is this more harmful to the community allowing that discussion? So it's a fine balance that I am learning. I just want to do a huge thank you to our guest today, Lara. You can find her on CrimmyC on twitch.tv. Yeah, I know Beta added the guest command because he thinks things through. Philippa, aka Phil. I don't really think I ever call you Philippa anymore. But you can find them on twitch.tv/Philippa. And Beta, even though says co-host and doesn't show his Twitch handle, Nerds Alive, you can go find him. I appreciate all the support and everyone being here and just having these discussions has been truly, truly appreciated. This was an incredibly important topic, and I was glad we were able to do it during Pride Month. That was something I really wanted to do and was special for a lot of us. We kind of had our own Pride since I've never really gotten to go to Pride and done the whole hurrah of it. So, I think this was
from it.
It was Pride without the booze. So.
Exactly, but we can make up for that later. Bye everyone.
Bye.
Bye.